stop drinking that human. It's arousing me, she screamed, but I couldn't stop. The metallic taste of the nutrient paste was the first real food I'd had in 3 days, and my stomach was a screaming void. I didn't give a shit what the giant, horned alien woman currently holding a plasma blade to my throat thought about my table manners. I squeezed the silver pouch harder, sucking down another mouthful of the gritty, gray sludge. Her hand, wrapped around my neck, tightened. Not enough to choke me, just enough to communicate pure, undiluted rage. Her shadow fell over me in the derelict galley, all sharp angles and predatory grace. She was built like a goddess of war, with dark obsidian skin that seemed to drink the faint light from the flickering emergency strobes. "Did you not hear me, off-worlder?" Her voice was a low growl, a vibration I felt in my teeth. "That is not food. It is a catalyst, a ritual primer." I swallowed, the paste coating my throat. "Lady, right now I'd eat the ass end of a Zargothian sandworm if it was slathered in this shit. It's called starving. You should try it sometime." I offered her the pouch. "Want a sip?" A muscle in her jaw jumped. Her eyes, the color of molten gold, narrowed to slits. "You mock the right of potency? You desecrate this space with your casual consumption." I leaned back against the grimy counter, trying to look bored instead of terrified. She had hunted me for 2 cycles across the skeletal remains of this crashed warship colony on Kalis. I was a scavenger, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, and she was the local welcoming committee. Look, I don't know what a rite of potency is, but if it tastes like military-grade protein, I'm all for it. I took another deliberate, noisy slurp. Her grip on my neck went rigid. A strange, heated flush was climbing her high cheekbones, a stark contrast to her dark skin. "Cease, now." The command was absolute, but her voice was a fraction tighter, strained. I saw a tremor in the hand holding the plasma blade. Its low hum seemed to pitch higher. Something was definitely wrong, and it wasn't just my impending evisceration. I was getting to her, not with my wit, but with my fucking lunch. "Make me," I rasped, my throat dry. A final defiant squeeze emptied the pouch. I tossed the foil onto the deck. It landed with a pathetic crinkle. Her golden eyes were blown wide now, the pupils huge and dark. She was breathing faster, her chest rising and falling in sharp, shallow movements. She wasn't just angry. She looked rattled, unsteady. "You fool," she breathed, the sound less of an insult and more of a horrified revelation. "You have saturated the air. The pheromones, they are meant to be released in the arena, under the twin suns, as a challenge." She took a step back, as if putting distance between us would help. It didn't. I could see the fine sheen of sweat on her brow. "Pheromones?" I laughed, a raw, scratchy sound. "You're telling me this goop is alien Viagra?" My sarcasm was a shield, the only weapon I had left. "You think I'm trying to get a rise out of you?" She stared at me, her head cocked. The misinterpretation was so profound it was almost funny. A rise, like an uprising, a challenge of dominance. Her gaze flickered down my body and back up, a slow, appraising burn that had nothing to do with assessing a threat and everything to do with something else. "Yes, you have issued the challenge. By consuming the catalyst, you have declared your potency. You have demanded my submission." Oh, fuck. This was not going the way I thought it would. "No, that's just a saying. It means—" I trailed off, realizing how impossible it would be to explain human idioms to a 7-foot-tall warrior priestess who was currently getting high on my snack fumes. Her nostrils flared. "The air is thick with your scent, your claim. It is potent." The word hung in the air between us, heavy and dangerous. Potent. Her body language shifted. The rigid anger was melting into something fluid and far more terrifying. She began to stalk toward me, her movement slow, deliberate, like a predator closing in on cornered prey. "Okay, let's all just take a deep breath," I said, holding my hands up. "Big misunderstanding. I'm just a dumb human who doesn't know any better. No challenge issued, I forfeit." Her lips, which were a shade darker than her skin, pulled back from her teeth. They were pointed. Of course they were. The right cannot be forfeited once the catalyst is spent. The challenge must be met. The scent must be answered. She was close now, so close I could feel the heat radiating from her body. It was an unnatural, feverish warmth. I could smell something too. Not the paste, but her. Ozone and some kind of wild, spicy musk that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "You have declared yourself a potential mate, human," she snarled, her voice dropping to a husky whisper that scraped along my nerves. "Now, you will prove your worth." My back hit the cold metal of the bulkhead. There was nowhere left to run. Her hand shot out, not with the blade, but to brace the wall next to my head, trapping me. The sheer size of her was overwhelming. She leaned in, her golden eyes boring into mine. "My name is Zelia. By the laws of the Cathar, I accept your challenge." I swallowed hard. "My name is Jax, and by the laws of holy shit don't kill me, I respectfully decline." She ignored me, her gaze dropping to my mouth. "The trial is simple. Dominance. The victor claims the spoils." Before I could spit out another sarcastic denial, the world outside the galley exploded. Red laser fire stitched across the bulkhead, melting straight through the pitted metal like it was butter. The shriek of tearing durasteel was deafening. Zelia reacted instantly, her warrior instincts overriding the pheromonal haze. She spun, her plasma blade igniting with a vicious snap hiss, deflecting a second volley of shots that would have turned me into a charred smear on the wall. "Mercenaries," she spat, the word a curse. "Chrome-plated bastards. The same ones who'd shot my scow out of the sky. They must have tracked me here. They will not take what I have claimed," Zelia roared, the sound echoing in the confined space. She grabbed the front of my jacket, her strength absolute, and hauled me away from the wall. She wasn't saving me. She was securing her property. She shoved me toward a dark, narrow opening I hadn't noticed before. A maintenance crawl space. In. Now. There was no room for argument. I scrambled into the tight, dark space, the smell of rust and old wiring filling my nostrils. She slid in behind me, sealing the hatch just as another volley of laser fire slagged the spot where we'd been standing. The darkness was absolute. We were pressed together in a tube that was barely wide enough for one person, let alone two. Her body was a wall of heat and muscle against my back. I could feel every ragged breath she took, every tremor that ran through her powerful frame. The enclosed space was an oven, concentrating the heat, the smell of her arousal, and my own mounting fear into a suffocating cocktail. The hunt was over. The trial, it seemed, was just beginning. The darkness was a physical presence, pressing in on all sides. All I knew was the feeling of Zelia's body plastered against mine, the hard plates of her armor digging into my back, the soft give of her thighs against my legs. Her breathing was a hot, ragged gust against the back of my neck. The air, already thick with the scent of the catalyst, was now superheated by the close quarters and the laser fire outside. The mercenaries were methodically blasting the area, trying to flush us out or cook us alive. Every metallic ping and groan of the ship's hull sent a fresh jolt of adrenaline through me. "They are persistent," she murmured, her voice a low vibration that traveled through my entire skeleton. I could feel the thrum of her pulse where her hip pressed against mine. It was a frantic, hammering rhythm. The pheromones were clearly doing a number on her. "Yeah, well, they get paid by the corpse," I grunted, trying to shift to create even a millimeter of space between us. It was useless. "Stop moving," she commanded, her voice strained. "You are making it worse." "Making what worse? We're about to be flambéed in a tin can. I think we've passed worse and are heading straight for fucked." "You agitate the air," she growled. "You stir the scent." I could feel her hips move, a slight involuntary press against me. It wasn't a shove. It was a grind. A primal, unconscious motion that sent a shockwave of heat straight to my groin. My own body, the traitor, responded instantly. "Shit. The bond. It demands proximity," she whispered, more to herself than to me. "The rite requires a crucible." I could feel her turning, contorting her body in the impossibly tight space until she was facing me. Her hands came up to brace my shoulders, her fingers digging in like claws. In the pitch black, all I had were my other senses. The spicy electric scent of her, the searing heat of her skin through her armor, the soft sound of her sharp inhale. Her face was inches from mine. I could feel her breath, hot and moist, ghosting across my lips. This wasn't a tactical repositioning. This was a claiming. The sounds of the mercenaries faded to a dull background hum, replaced by the roaring in my own ears. "You started this, human," she breathed, her voice thick with a mixture of rage and raw, undeniable need. "You lit the fire." Her strength was terrifying. She pinned me against the corrugated metal wall of the tunnel, my head knocking back with a dull thud. This wasn't seduction. It was conquest. A fight for dominance played out in a suffocating tube of metal, miles from anything that resembled civilization. Her mouth crashed down on mine. It wasn't a kiss. It was a brand. Hard and demanding, her teeth grazing my lip, drawing a bead of blood. The coppery taste mingled with the lingering flavor of the catalyst and the scent of her arousal. It was a kiss that tasted like violence and desperation. My survival instinct screamed at me to fight, to push her away. But my body, drenched in adrenaline and reacting to her overwhelming presence, had other ideas. The initial shock gave way to a surge of pure, defiant heat. If I was going to die in this tube, it wasn't going to be as some passive victim. I stopped fighting her and started fighting back. I kissed her back with all the frustration and fear and anger I had, my hands coming up to grip her waist, pulling her impossibly closer. A guttural sound tore from her throat, a noise of shock and approval. The struggle shifted. It was no longer her against me. It became us against the universe, a frantic, desperate clash in the dark. Her hands were everywhere, tearing at the clasps of my jacket, her armored knuckles scraping my skin. I fumbled with the strange fastenings of her armor, driven by a need to feel the skin I knew was burning beneath it. The fight bled into a frenzy. There was no tenderness, only a raw, desperate friction. Her armor was a frustrating barrier, but we tore at clothes and straps, a frantic disassembly in the dark. My back scraped against the tunnel wall, the cold metal a stark contrast to the fire of her skin against mine. When we were finally skin to skin, the contact was electric. A gasp was torn from both of us. The pheromonal haze was no longer just in the air. It felt like it was in my blood, singing a song of pure biological imperative. My thoughts, which had been a frantic litany of fuck, 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 simplified. Her, now. The dominance she had claimed was met with a defiance she hadn't expected. I flipped us in the tight space, a clumsy, desperate maneuver that put my back against the opposite wall and her pinned beneath me. A low growl rumbled in her chest, but she didn't fight the reversal. She arched into it, her long legs wrapping around my waist, locking me to her. This was the trial. This was the verdict. And we were both judge and jury. From Zelia's perspective, the world had dissolved into heat and scent and a singular, overwhelming need. The human, Jax, was no longer just a target or a nuisance. He was the focal point of a biological firestorm she couldn't control. His scent, the catalyst he'd so foolishly consumed, had rewritten her very being. The right demanded a victor, but his shocking defiance, his refusal to simply be conquered, had changed the rules. He wasn't submitting. He was meeting her. As his body covered hers, a jolt went through her deeper than pleasure. It was the snap of a connection, ancient and unbreakable. The catharkin, a soul bond. In that blinding moment of climax, she didn't just feel his body. She felt a flash of him, a ghost of a memory, a failing engine screaming alarms, a friend's face disappearing into a cloud of fire and debris, guilt, loss, a pain so profound it stole her breath. And then it was over, leaving them both panting, slick with sweat, in the suffocating dark. The aftermath was a deafening silence, broken only by our ragged gasps for air. The immediate frantic need was gone, replaced by a heavy, charged stillness. The bond she'd felt was a tangible thing, a low hum beneath her skin connecting her to the man lying on top of her. He wasn't just a human anymore. He was hers, in a way that had nothing to do with conquest and everything to do with a shared, cataclysmic moment. She felt a wave of possessiveness so fierce it was dizzying, followed by a shocking sliver of vulnerability. She had seen his pain. The right wasn't supposed to do that. Jax pushed himself up slightly, his weight a comforting pressure. He was trembling, or maybe she was. What the hell was that? He rasped, his voice raw. Before she could find the words to explain a concept as fundamental and complex as a soul bond, the world outside reminded them of its presence. A loud, metallic screech echoed down the tunnel. The mercenaries were using a plasma cutter on the hatch. They had maybe a minute. That, Zelia said, her voice low and steady despite the chaos in her soul, was the right. The bond is forged. She shoved at his shoulder. Get up, the trial isn't over. He stared down at where she knew his eyes were in the dark. He couldn't see the conflict in her face, the confusion. All he could hear was the command in her voice. He moved, untangling his limbs from hers. They dressed in a clumsy, silent haste. The intimacy of the act a stark contrast to the violence that had preceded it. The bond was thrumming between them now, a strange low-frequency awareness. She knew where he was without seeing. She could feel the grim resolve solidifying in him. Just as he fastened his last buckle, the hatch at the end of the tunnel blew inward with a deafening boom. Light flooded the crawl space, silhouetting two hulking figures in polished chrome armor, their rifles raised. Without a word, without a plan, Zelia moved. She shoved Jax behind her, her plasma blade igniting, its brilliant, deadly light illuminating their cramped prison. She met the first mercenary's advance with a ferocious lunge. But this time, Jax didn't just cower. He moved with her. He'd found a heavy metal pipe during their scramble in the dark, and he swung it with desperate force at the second merc's legs, sending the armored figure stumbling. The awareness between them was uncanny. It wasn't telepathy. It was something more instinctual. A combat symbiosis. She would lunge, and he would be there to cover her exposed flank. He would create an opening, and she would exploit it with lethal precision. She felt a surge of pride. The human wasn't just potent. He was a fighter. He fought like a cornered animal, with a viciousness that matched her own. She drove her blade through the first merc's chest plate, the superheated energy melting through his armor and electronics. As she pulled the weapon free, the second merc recovered, raising its rifle to fire point blank at her head. Jax was already there. He brought the pipe down in a two-handed swing on the merc's helmet. The chrome dented with a sickening crunch, and the figure collapsed. They stood there for a second, panting, surrounded by the smell of burnt metal and ozone. He looked at her, his eyes wild in the flickering light of her blade. He wasn't her prisoner. He wasn't her conquest. He was her partner. She reached out and snatched the plasma pistol from the hip of the downed mercenary and shoved it into his hands. "Fight for your claim, Jax," she ordered. The words tasted different now. It wasn't a command to a subordinate. It was a charge to an equal. They burst from the tunnel into the ruined galley, moving as a single, deadly unit. Two more mercenaries were waiting, laying down suppressing fire. Jax, surprisingly, knew how to use the pistol. He laid down cover fire, his shots wild but effective, forcing the mercs to duck behind wreckage. This gave Zelia the opening she needed. She moved like a blur, a whirlwind of obsidian skin and glowing plasma. She didn't just fight, she danced, a lethal ballet of death that was terrifying and beautiful to behold. Jax found himself watching her, a strange awe mixing with the adrenaline. He wasn't just fighting for his life, he was fighting for theirs. The bond, the Katharkin, hummed between them, a silent communication that guided their actions. He saw a merc flanking her and fired without thinking, the plasma bolt catching the soldier in the shoulder and spinning him around. Zelia finished him with a clean, upward stroke of her blade. They cleared the galley and moved into the main corridor, back to back, a two-person army against a squad of trained killers. The ship became their arena. They used the wreckage for cover, the shadows for ambush. Her raw power and skill were augmented by his scrappy ingenuity and sheer stubborn refusal to die. He was a scavenger. He knew every bolt hole, every weak point in this type of freighter. He led them through service ways and cargo holds, turning the mercenaries' hunt into a death trap. Standing over the last dead mercenary, its chrome armor smoking, they finally stopped. The silence of the warship settled around them, heavy and final. They were covered in grime, sweat, and the splattered fluids of their enemies. Jax's knuckles were bleeding, and Zelia had a shallow laser burn along her arm. She deactivated her blade, and the sudden darkness was broken only by the ship's faint emergency lights. They looked at each other, and the raw, dangerous energy between them was no longer just sexual. It was respect. "The bond," Zelia said, her voice quiet but certain, "is sealed in victory." It was a statement of cultural, spiritual fact. You are mine, Jax. He let out a short, harsh laugh, wiping a smear of blood from his lip with the back of his hand. He looked at her, at the fierce, possessive, and impossibly beautiful warrior standing before him. He was no longer her prisoner. She was no longer his captor. They were something new, forged in chaos and sealed in blood. "Looks to me," he said, a slow, tired smirk spreading across his face, "like we're ours."